Hey loves, my name is Amber, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to be discussing Anthem by Noah Hawley. Before we get too far into this review, I did want to note that while this video is not monetarily sponsored in any way, I did receive an advanced copy of the book from the organization Novel Suspects in order to review and feature on my social channels. And that also means that I did get an advance copy of the book, so there's technically the possibility of some slight change between the version that I read and the final publicized version, but any changes should only be minor and shouldn't affect this review in any way. A lot of potentially triggering and upsetting topics and remarks are discussed throughout the book as part of different plot points and characterizations. Most prevalently featured and upsetting are self-harm, mass suicide, and sexual abuse of minors, but there are so many different things that could be potentially upsetting. I honestly, because like if you're familiar with my channel, you will know that I usually feature a whole list of potential trigger warnings just in case anybody has particular preferences about what they read. I kept track and had pages in my notes app, so I was like, you know what, we're just gonna do a general blanket because there are so many little things, and not in a way that's like meant to be hateful or anything. There are just so many different characterizations within the book that it's exemplifying different characters and aspects of their personalities, whether it be loving or hateful. So just beware that while you're reading, you're probably going to be a little bit upset or offended by something within the book. Doesn't matter who you are, at one point or another, it'll probably bother you at some point. When it comes to representation, we have a large variety of characters from vastly different backgrounds, races, and sexualities, so we do get a little bit of everything at one point or another within the book as well, whether it be for better or for worse in the particular context that it's featured in. But again, we'll get into it. The book takes place in a near future, several years after the COVID-19 pandemic that we're currently experiencing in our history, in what feels like is what is heading towards a dystopian America. There's a global epidemic of youth suicide on a mass scale, and there aren't any answers as to why. Not only that, but every suicide has been paired with the symbol A11 left somewhere along the body or the crime scene site. While the book features clips from a varied cast of characters, we primarily follow Margot, who is a conservative judge in the running for the Supreme Court, whose young adult daughter has disappeared without a trace. The book also, more importantly, follows Simon, a teen who has been placed in an anxiety treatment center after the suicide of his sister, which did occur several months before the current epidemic had occurred, and his journey after breaking out of the center with fellow patients Louise and the Prophet, on a mission from God, who has allegedly told the Prophet that Simon is the key to saving the world. But in like a less religious way than it kind of sounds like as somebody, I'm not somebody who is very deeply invested in religious stories. That didn't like affect the readability of the book at all. People who are into religious stories may or may not be into that particular aspect because of how it is depicted, but since I am not one of those people, I cannot officially confirm or deny. The first half of the book does feel very, very scattered because we alternate chapters of different characters and perspectives, all experiencing their own different stories. The two primary recurring storylines are that of Simon and Margot, but each of their chapters are interspersed with chapters from other people's stories and points of view. All of them are just seemingly random and like completely unconnected, and you really don't understand the point of it for like the first half of the book. Until about like the second half of the book, all of the pieces start coming together. And you see how all of the characters featured are intricately connected to feature one overarching storyline that's just simply told out of order and from multiple different perspectives. And honestly, the level of intricacy and interconnectedness that all of these characters and stories have is genuinely quite impressive. Like, I do honestly have to commend the author for being able to put this together and write it, because there are so many elements, both large and small, that just come together and it is this whole fully fleshed out story that you get once you finish the book. It's so intricate. It's very, very impressive. Like, if nothing else, I would definitely recommend reading it to have the satisfaction of all of the storylines coming together in a way that I've genuinely just never seen before. Like, because I've definitely seen, you know, different books and different pieces of media that have interconnected storylines that work pretty well, but never to this scale with this many people with these kinds of topics. It's very, very impressive. It does lead to a little bit of an interesting reading experience for like the first half of the book, simply because you're like, why should we care about any of these characters? And you don't really, for the most part, until you get to the second half and it's like, oh shit, this is how everything's connecting and how people are related to each other, or how different pieces of the story are different pieces of the whole overarching story. And it's honestly a little bit mind-blowing. A lot of the book and some of the topics that are featured within it are honestly a little bit difficult to get through, simply because of the emotional nature of some of them, or just how like uncomfortable and discomforting they are. And that is definitely the point. Like, they are used very intentionally for the most part, I think, to give that sense of discomfort and to show different sides and perspectives of things. So I can't really complain, but on the flip side of that, I could also see a lot of people getting turned off the book while reading because different things do make them so uncomfortable. Because like, they're so like, I'm trying to figure out a good way to exemplify what exactly I mean without spoiling much of the book. We do get a lot of different viewpoints. There is a lot of political discussion, but in kind of like more of a vague way. Like, they don't specifically specify conservative versus liberal. They use metaphors for it, but there are very distinctly, you know, conservative versus liberal viewpoints and beliefs that play a part into the story. There's, you know, different perspectives, people of different races, of different sexualities, of different genders, of different ages, different socioeconomic backgrounds. So there are so many different points of view of this whole storyline. There's this whole epidemic of suicide going on, of all of these teenagers are killing themselves without any specific explanation. So throughout the book, we do discover the meaning of the A11 symbol, and we discover why this epidemic is happening. It's really difficult to say because some of the elements of the book are so heartbreaking, but really the book is exemplifying our future here in America within the next few years if we don't make any drastic changes. I think the book was very, very specifically influenced by the era of Trump's America, who within the book is referred to as the God King. Not necessarily because he's being praised specifically throughout the book. Like, certain characters are, but throughout the book, like, the overall vibe isn't that it's pro-Trump or anything like that, for anybody who immediately wanted to click off after I said that. It makes sense within the context of the book, and I think it's a way to make you a little bit uncomfortable and to show, you know, the extremes of some of these opinions that people have. I truly do not know how to like properly and well explain this book, because it is just so unique and unlike anything I have ever read or experienced before. So all I can really say is just like, if you do want to read it for yourself, definitely go into it expecting that you're probably going to be uncomfortable by some topic or another, but also don't place your judgments until you finish the book, because there are a lot of really good messages behind it. And I think the overall point is kind of wholesome, and just this concept that like we need to change things in order for things to change. And that we have all of these adults in these older generations that have had their time, that have fucked things up, that really need to allow these younger generations and these kids who are trying to find themselves and become their own to be able to do that and to be able to change the country and the world for the better. But it's all done in such like a subtle and intricate way, like that doesn't feel like that's the direct slap across the face kind of point of the book. But I also know that a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, oh, that's some hippy dippy bullshit, or like that's a very, very, you know, simplified explanation of a much more complex problem. And I absolutely hear those arguments. So I want to specify that like that's not what the whole reading experience of the book felt like. It's definitely much more character-based and character-driven, and quite frankly, a lot of the vibe of the book is very, very hopeless and desolate and despair, but like in a modern way. Like not just in an overly dramatic, like fantasized world, but just in a very, very realistic, things are going so downhill so fast that they will continue to go downhill unless drastic changes are made to the world and society. I don't know. I'll be honest, I know that this isn't the best or the most concise or eloquent review that I've ever given, but it's also one of the more unique and weird reading experiences I've ever had, so do with that what you will. I don't know. I do think I recommend it. I do think that it's something that a lot of people should read, but I also know that a lot of people aren't really going to get it because, as the book exemplifies, there are a lot of people who are not good people or who care more about themselves and power than they do the good of everything else, and it's a lot. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I had a blast hanging out with y'all. Peace.